Story 1. 10 years ago, there would have been thousands of comments. You have not even reached 100 yet. I would say the answer is they do not. Laugh out loud. Story 2. Not me, but my grandparents. My grandma is very liberal, to the point of arguing about any political topic my cousin posts on Facebook. My cousin leans more to the right but dislikes Donald Trump. My grandpa is a huge supporter of Donald Trump. They hate each other and cannot stand being around each other. They live separately most of the time, and when they are together, it is constant arguing. It sounds exhausting, and I have no idea why they are still married, especially since they have the means to get a divorce. Story 3. Differing but not opposing views. I am further on the left in the United Kingdom, aligned with the Labour and Green parties, while he is more centrist, similar to the Liberal Democrats. We get along mostly well. Sometimes during political discussions, it becomes clear that I care more about the issues than he does. This used to bother me, but as I have gotten older, it no longer does. We both avoid social media and the news for our mental health. Increasingly, I believe that embracing some ignorance, especially in a world where information is constantly overwhelming us, becomes necessary for survival. I would really struggle to be romantically involved with someone who was right-wing. While I respect my family and his family who are further to the right, that represents a much bigger difference. His family is actually much further to the right and occasionally express opinions that make me uncomfortable or differ drastically from my own. That is the main issue, the in-laws. Story 4. If you are with someone rational and normal, you can find common ground. I have done so, and it was a normal relationship. If you have an extreme fanatic on either end, it is basically impossible to even meet in the first place unless by small chance. Story 5. I live in Europe where, in most countries at least, most people do not consider differing non-extremist political views a direct attack on them and everything they love. Most couples I know do not agree on everything when it comes to politics, and there is nothing wrong with that. Story 6. Having more than 2 noteworthy parties helps significantly. Story 7. Where I live, there are 13 parties in parliament and 3 parties that form the current government. I think it is quite common for couples to vote for different parties. However, voting for parties on opposite ends of the political spectrum is less common. The far right usually does not support minority rights, and the far left typically does not prioritize private property. Story 8. This thread boils down to the idea that it is easy and natural to get along despite very different political opinions, as long as neither person supports Donald Trump. Story 9. I'm a Democrat and my wife has been a lifelong Republican. We get along great. She is a Romney and McCain Republican, and we can find common ground on a lot of things politically. We both despise Donald Trump, and she will not be voting for him even though she is a registered Republican. In our state, there are some Republicans we both vote for down ballot because they are sensible. It goes both ways. If she became a supporter of the Make America Great Again movement, I don't think we would still be together, honestly. But we are both open to different views and are more in the middle than anything. Story 10. We are not chronically online and do not make our entire lives and personalities about politics. Most people are not on the radical ends of either spectrum, and most people have much more in common with each other than they might think. Story 11. When we first started dating, I considered myself a member of the Republican Party, and my husband was a member of the Democratic Party. This was over 15 years ago. I was relatively uninterested and uninformed when it came to politics, but I grew up in a Republican household and voted for the Republican Party. Once I educated myself, it turned out my views aligned more with the Democratic Party. The presidency of Donald Trump solidified that for me. Initially, we thought we would have opposing views, but we were willing to give it a try anyway. Given the Republican Party's journey over the last 8 years, if we met for the first time today and I was still a Republican, I am certain my husband would hesitate to date me. However, I would not date a Republican either. The party as it once was no longer exists. It has become largely defined by the Make America Great Again movement. Story 12. We do not discuss politics at the dinner table, in the bedroom, or anywhere else. Ignorance is bliss, and election day is basically our purge. Story 13. If you do not think your spouse has political opinions that are legitimate or fairly held, you ultimately should not be married. If you acknowledge your spouse has legitimately held opinions, it is reasonable to accept them even if you disagree. Story 14. My husband and I vote differently because we have different political issues that we support. That being said, we are not American, and the United States only has two parties that are very different. At least my husband's and my parties have common ground. Story 15. I talk about how the inevitable revolution will execute her. She counters and says it will likely consume itself. We laugh at them. Sometimes we make out. Story 16. Less than 8% of married couples have opposing political opinions. According to the Institute of Family Studies and the National Institute of Health, this number has decreased to 3.6%. It is exceptionally rare. Story 17. By still acting like it is the politics of 10 years ago, you can agree on some things and disagree on others. I do not think a Trump-loving far right and a corporate far left could ever be united, but you can both be in your respective corners, have middle views on many issues, and accept that it is okay not to agree on everything in life. If by different political view you mean racist or hateful beliefs, or the opposite of accepting everyone, even pedophiles and rapists, that is not political. You are just a person with irrational views. Story 18. Everyone has differing political views. What you mean is couples who have opposing political views, and those are quite rare these days as it has become increasingly apparent that politics are not just a side opinion you have alongside ice cream flavors and favorite books. Story 19. Not me, but my parents. I'm in my 30s, they're in their 50s and still happily married. Dad is conservative and mom is liberal. I think the divergence likely came around their mid-20s when my dad became self-employed and they relied solely on his income. He worked long hours while mom stayed home and filled much of her time with daytime talk shows and cable news. It's ironic. She talks about the plight of various communities, yet had a lot of free time but never volunteered, whereas my dad's business sponsored many extracurricular activities for underserved communities and people. They get along great, and I rarely see it get contentious. I see them maybe 3 to 4 times per year, and anytime politics come up, we try to steer the conversation in another direction or just turn our attention toward a nearby child, nieces, nephews, dogs, or grandparents, not giving them a chance to get started. They love each other and have so much in common outside of politics that it doesn't really impact their relationship. Their lives are rich in other areas, so their political ideologies aren't a major part of their identities. Their discussions are always very respectful too. Story 20. My last ex was very liberal and I lean more toward the centrist side. When we were together, we agreed on many things. Politics were not the reason we broke up. Story 21. She calls me an idiot. I call her a moron. Then we focus on what is important. Story 22. Talking to an individual person is not the same as a loud group online. For example, I can understand why some people think abortion is murder and why others think it is not. If you are not responding with claims like, the left just wants people to abort babies born at 9 months because they are murderers, and I do not do this either with my views, we can have a reasonable discussion about those views if we choose. I have dated some right-leaning women in the past. It was never an issue in my experience. Story 23. I am slightly further left than my husband, but we are both firmly leftists. We agree to disagree on how certain issues should be handled and which policies should take priority. We discuss politics fairly often and have minor debates about our stances on given issues. Sometimes one of us changes the other's mind, but most of the time we walk away with a better understanding of how the other thinks and more respect for different perspectives. At the end of the day, we share the same values. Our politics come from empathy and a desire to make the world more equitable. I could not have a relationship with someone who does not share the same core values. I do not know how a relationship would work if the morals and values truly differ. Story 24. Reading these replies is a funny reminder that Reddit is going to have a major meltdown in a few weeks. Story 25. Not a big deal if you are not constantly online. My wife and I vote on different sides of the aisle. It is not a huge deal to either of us because politics is a small part of our lives. You should go outside. Story 26. I feel that for most people, including myself, politics plays a very small part in our lives. Therefore, it really does not matter what our partner's views are. Story 27. My ex and I were on opposite sides of the Israel-Palestine conflict when we met. Arguing about politics is what made us fall in love with each other. Especially him. He always told me that he marveled at how well I articulated my position even though he did not agree with me then. I think our differences worked because we were from different countries. While I disagreed with him, I understood that growing up during the Lebanese Civil War would influence his viewpoints in ways that I could not possibly understand. Story 28. This election, we cancel each other out across probably the entire ballot. I have about 3 issues I care about, and she seems to care about every issue. She says, "What about this issue and that issue?" My response is, I don't care about those issues, so either candidate's position on them doesn't matter to me. I think all politicians are disappointing, and I don't care to talk to or share a beer with any of them. If they had valuable skills, they would use them to create something or grow a business. Since governors seem to be out of favor as a position before the presidency, in my opinion, the people we have to pick from are senators. Lately, they have never led anything as they aim to lead the country. Story 29. Realize that politics is more than single issues and that one election may impact your spouse in ways that it does not affect you. Unfortunately, there is rarely a candidate who is good for all issues, especially across multiple businesses and industries. Story 30. I think if the following is not biased, a conversation is actually extremely interesting to have. We get to know both sides, positive and negative, and also become informed. There are some lively debates on certain topics and policies. Story 31. Ha! Push all the resentment down and save it for your divorce? Story 32. I would not be in a relationship with that person because fundamental values on things like human rights are not negotiable. We are not disagreeing on minutiae that do not really matter. These are things that impact real people's lives on a daily basis, people I know and love, and people I do not know but still respect on a human level. These are not things I can compromise on. Story 33. Do not be chronically online and realize everyone, for the most part, has the same goal but a different idea on how to achieve it. Story 34. Politics are a very small aspect of who you are. It does not bother me. Social media makes political views seem like the most important aspect of your life. However, all you have is a single irrelevant vote. It does not carry much weight. Story 35. Imagine having an open conversation with someone who does not think like you. Story 36. Criticize each other and laugh about it. In the end, they all lie to get into office. Story 37. We like adults and have thick enough skin to disagree with each other. Sometimes our talks get heated and then we reconcile. Story 38. We do not have to have the same ideas to care for each other. It is that simple. Story 39. I'm permanently single, having only had a couple of partners, but as long as there are no extremes. I remember with one of my girlfriends in the 1990s, I had a strong dislike of the band Korn. It was during my teenage years, and that was not political, but it upset her. Story 40. I just opened my mind and so did she. We also do not talk about politics all the time. It is not that hard to deal with. Story 41. There are things that are more serious than politics between couples. If they can get through that, politics are nothing. Story 42. If her preferred candidate wins, she gets a back massage which leads to shenanigans. If my preferred candidate wins, she gets a back massage which leads to shenanigans. Actually, I just realized I need to give her a back massage. Story 43. I do not let politics become my entire personality. Honestly, I cannot give the energy to care anyway. My partner understands this and leaves me be. Story 44. The reality is, my wife and I are too busy working and raising our kids to be nearly as invested in politics as the average Reddit user. Neither of us are on the extreme sides of either party. We do not watch the doomsday media or their negativity about each candidate. If we have questions, we research each politician's policies and go from there. We take the kids to the polls with us, vote, and then go get a pizza for dinner. Usually, we do not even tell each other who we voted for. Story 45. We do not talk about it. We do not center our lives around politics. We respect that others may not vote the same way, and that is fine. Story 46. We don't. Our relationship does not revolve around our political views. I fell in love with him because of who he was when I first met and interacted with him. None of what we talked about was political. We have different political views, but I respect and love his opinion. I welcome him respectfully and lovingly pushing back on my opinions. In fact, it is almost foreplay for me. It is attractive. I do not want someone who agrees with everything I say. Boring. Story 47. I could answer this question, but it is from a very Christian perspective, and I am not engaging with the replies. Story 48. It is easy. Life is not politics. I live in a purple house, with red and blue existing together. It is not hard. Story 49. I think two important things. 1. Share many core values and agree on the major issues. 2. Our lives do not revolve around politics. We rarely discuss it. Story 50. Listen, respect, listen some more. Choose a partner committed to doing the same. Story 51. I am American. Although not the target of the question, as a liberal woman, I would not even begin to consider a Republican man as a potential partner. No man who is okay with a group of older men making educated guesses about legal policy concerning my bodily autonomy will ever be romantically involved with me. Story 52. I tried it. We have now been separated for 2 years, and that is one of the reasons why. Also, I have a friend in a politically divisive marriage where one partner is cheating on the other significantly. I suspect they barely love each other, and even then only like family. Story 53. My wife and I shared core values and a sense of spirituality until we moved closer to her family. Now she is a conservative Christian Republican, and I am an agnostic Democrat. It is hard, but it is only as hard as you make it. Some days I cannot be in the same room because Donald Trump said something offensive and I laughed, but she cannot handle that. So, I go to the bed or the couch and enjoy some excellent programming. Story 54. At least for my parents and my wife's parents, the answer is subservient women. My mother's opinion never mattered as much as my father's. The same is still true for my mother-in-law. I continually call both of them out for not treating her as an equal or for her not acting like one. She votes for the Democratic Party and does not tell her husband. He is not violent toward her, but he definitely does not treat her as an equal. Story 55. In the modern environment, one would have to be comfortable with dating a person who holds racial biases, it seems. Story 56. My fiancé and I do fine together. We have similar moral values but opposite political views. We both criticize each other's side, and it's actually kind of fun. I think we both know that no matter which side you support, the average person is most likely getting the short end of the stick. Story 57. It has become much harder now that identity politics, also known as bigotry, has become so resurgent. It used to be, I disagree with your opinion, but now it has become, I disagree with your existence. I find your existence to be a moral crime. You are morally wrong for being born the way you were. That kind of thinking is basically impossible to live with. I cannot stop being who I am. Story 58. We love each other more than we love politics. Some worship politics. Some worship a god. Some worship their spouse or family. I think the online community leans more toward political worship than the general population, which is why commenters often cannot understand how a household can have differing political views. Politics are simply not the couple's priority. Story 59. You value the person and are glad to know someone who sees the world differently than you and values their perspective. It is a non-issue. Until very recently, it was normal to have many friends who saw the world differently than you. Intolerance is on the rise. It is frightening how the extremes in both parties preach intolerance while talking about enhancing freedom, and how people do not realize that all the media getting them riled up is pure manipulation. Put down your devices and go make interesting friends. People are cool, even maybe especially the ones who vote differently than you. Story 60. Mostly, we don't talk about where we disagree. I know she is a smart and good person. She knows I am a smart and good person. That is what matters. Two smart, moral people can have different ideas. Story 61. I appreciate the differing viewpoints. Ultimately, it is not an important factor in our marriage. Story 62. I'm conservative and she's liberal. We love each other more than we dislike each other's politics. Neither of us views politics as truly that important. We are very understanding of one another. I understand why she is the way she is, and I love her for who she is and all that encompasses. Story 63. My wife leans left, and I lean right. Neither of us are constantly online, and we both have genuine personalities and hobbies that do not revolve around politics. When we discuss politics, we agree on about half of the topics and disagree on the other half. If we disagree, we talk about our reasoning and move on without arguing or name-calling like mature, well-adjusted people. Story 64. It is easy. Do not make politics your entire identity or everything you care about. It is not the most important thing in my opinion, but some people think it is. Men and women often have differing political views to some degree. The key is to let it go and focus on whether you are compatible with them as a person. Are they a good person? Are they responsible? Are they a good husband or wife? Story 65. Letting the Reddit narrative of everyone who disagrees with me on X or Y issue is ontologically evil is a sure way to never have anything good in life. Stop believing you are right about everything and accept that the real world is not the political bubble this website is. Then maybe you can start finding people you are actually compatible with. For the longest time, this did not matter when it came to relationships as long as your cultural background was similar enough. Nowadays, people start having mental breakdowns when their partner disagrees with them on anything. Grow up already. Story 66. She is not interested in talking about politics and ignores me when I do. Honestly, it has been fine. We have been together for 23 years and married for 17. It has never been an issue. Story 67. I did not. It was not the main reason for the divorce, but it certainly did not help matters. Story 68. I think it is about wanting the same goals but disagreeing on how to achieve them. Story 69. We do not talk about it all day every day, and when we do, we are respectful of the other person's views. Crazy concept, I know. Story 70. I'm Bernie Sanders. I am left-leaning and he is conservative but not Make America Great Again conservative. I am willing to work with conservatives who are not Make America Great Again supporters. Story 71. Life is not just politics. To a greater extent, we share values. We do not push our politics on each other, nor do we have reason to talk about it incessantly. She votes one way, I another. But honestly, if either of us switched candidates, it would mean nothing to the other. Story 72. I didn't marry my wife for her politics. I married her because I love her. She doesn't like Donald Trump, but I do. Do I love her less for it? No, because politics doesn't define a person. You can disagree with someone and still like them. Story 73. If you choose to see that people are more than their politics, which is downstream of many things and leads to strange outcomes, then you will see the real person. If you choose to see people as no more than their politics, which is downstream of many things and leads to strange outcomes, then you will see only a small part of that person. I feel bad for those who cannot see past it. Story 74. Small issues are fine. But if my wife said she supported a rapist and serial adulterer, she would not be someone I could stay married to. Story 75. Some people probably do not make politics their entire personalities. Story 76. Do not care that much or base your personality on politics. It is that easy. Story 77. Most people, and I know this is hard to believe from what you see online, are not so outwardly passionate about their views that they cannot get along with moderate differing viewpoints. It really depends on how different they are and in what areas. Specific policy implementation is probably not a deal breaker. Huge rifts in core values related to one's sense of ethics and morality are more likely to pose a danger to the relationship. My wife and I do not get along on everything, but the big pieces we generally agree on. Story 78. I am in the United States. 15 years ago, okay, sure, we could have done it, but not now. The political right has become a Disney villain without any complex backstory or character development. Story 79. My mom was a Republican because her father was, And her husband was the kind of Democrat who protested at the Capitol when he returned from Vietnam. Politics was not often discussed around the house. I was an Alex P. Keaton Republican before I found myself drifting further to the left. By the time I got married, I was a big liberal Democrat. She was raised in a conservative military household and often mocked me for being a liberal softie. We did not have much common political ground, but she did like that Barack Obama was black. That was a start. She slowly evolved over time, and 15 years later, I would say she is probably farther to the left than I am. Story 80. Like grown-ups, it is not the end of the world if you are intolerant of differing views and cannot be with someone. You are as mature as a toddler. Story 81. We basically agree on the basics. She is liberal and I am conservative. We both want to help people, we just have different ways of achieving that. Story 82. I pity people who believe you cannot be in a relationship with someone who holds different political views. They have embraced partisan politics so deeply that they are disgusted by anyone who disagrees with them. They are psychologically bound to their party's positions at that moment. It resembles a religious practice more than political engagement. How is it not a form of mental illness to say you cannot date someone who votes for the other candidate? Story 83. I feel like there are couples who have very different political and moral opinions, and most would say they could not live with someone who does not share at least the majority of their morals or principles. There are really only two conclusions I can think of for couples who differ greatly in this regard. One, they never talk about those subjects, which is strange to me. I could not be with someone who does not think deeply about important matters and have insight and opinions regarding them. Two, they do not communicate much in general with each other, which again is strange. I am not sure what people talk about if they are not discussing life and world events at some point, because it inevitably has to come up, and there has to be fundamental disagreement. Story 84. I'm a centrist with a slight left lean, and my wife is fairly conservative. I have pulled her toward the center over time, but her family is very right-wing. We have thorough political discussions and disagree on some things. It really comes down to understanding that most political positions are extensions of the assumptions and preferences of those who hold them. Where my wife and I disagree most is usually on government regulation. She has had experiences that made her extremely mistrustful of regulators, while I tend to focus on economic goals that require updated or new regulation. She also worries about the border more than I do since we live in Arizona, where it is a close issue. This does not mean one of us is wrong. It means we prefer different things and have different experiences. Keeping that in mind helps us maintain love and respect for each other even when we disagree on political issues. For the record, we agreed on voting for Kamala Harris this year, but differed on local and state elections, especially for our county sheriff. We still love and respect each other. Story 85. We have the same values and politics is not really that important. Story 86. Not me personally, but my parents. My dad is a former police officer turned business owner, and my mom was a hippie turned interior designer. They have totally opposite political views. They have been happily married for 45 years. I have never heard them discuss politics with each other, and growing up, it was always a forbidden topic at the dinner table. All I can say is that they really love each other and always put their partner first in everything they do. It probably also helps that my dad is a Reagan Republican and not a Trump Republican. Story 87. Politics is not that important in our lives. We joke that we cancel out each other's votes. Not this year, though. Story 88. Political alignment is not necessarily right or wrong. It is a difference of morals. If people do not share the same morals, they typically do not last very long. Story 89. Recognize that your partner is not an idiot. You just have different views on what you want the world to look like. The same applies to anyone with a differing opinion. Once one side resorts to personal insults, they have lost the argument. Story 90. I imagine it is a lot easier if one's social circle includes no marginalized people. Story 91. My girlfriend and I mostly share the same views. She was strongly against firearms when I first met her, and I am a gun owner. She comes from a country where only a select few own firearms, so we clashed a lot on gun control issues. I eventually won her over by taking her to the shooting range with me and helping her pick up her first handgun. Story 92. Please note that this comment section is almost entirely Democrats saying they would not date Republicans. This is a one-sided discussion, and most right-leaning people I know do not care what their potential partner thinks about issues they are most likely uneducated on or unable to form a neutral opinion about, whether right or left. Story 93. I am left. She is right. When we disagree, we simply accept it and move to a new topic. It is not complicated. Politics takes up less than 5% of our total communication. There is far too much happening in life to waste time debating politics. Story 94. If my spouse voted for Donald Trump, I would divorce her. This is not a threat, just a fact. It is not about politics. It is about morals. Story 95. Although my spouse is a registered Republican and I tend to vote Democratic, we simply respect each other and each other's views. Our personal experiences have shaped how we view things, and we respect that we come from different backgrounds and have different perspectives. That is what made us who we are today. We do not always disagree and we do not always agree on things, but that does not mean we cannot be respectful of our perspectives. Admittedly, this time they are voting for Harris for various reasons, but this election has been extremely polarizing, which I am sure many agree with. I have never thought less of them for voting differently and vice versa. Much depends on our focused issues, which differ at times. The main thing is we respect differences between ourselves and others. Story 96. I'm married to a liberal, and I am conservative. I do not like either party and do not accept the Republican label. My spouse feels the same about Democrats. We work through political differences the same way we do any other, by talking. The times we disagree have decreased because my spouse is a moderate liberal, and I am a moderate conservative. We both see some of the benefits in the other's beliefs. Truthfully, no party knows everything or has all the right solutions. The sooner people realize that, the better off we will all be. Story 97. It works better if you come from different backgrounds, so it is just one of many differences. Especially different countries. My girlfriend is Japanese. My political views related to my girlfriend's are not easy to just lay out on a spectrum. Our countries have fundamentally different issues going on. The only overlap is international policy and history, which we do disagree on in some ways. For example, I am in favor of Ishiba because of his desire to form an Asian North Atlantic Treaty Organization. She disagrees with that because she believes it is just one more step on the path towards war. Story 98. If we can be respectful about the issue, we can discuss it. If one of us cannot for some reason, we should not talk about it unless it is critical or impacts our current lives. Story 99. We do not talk about politics that much. We agree on some things but not all. The things that matter we tend to agree on. We also do not let politics invade our personal lives or become part of our personalities as it appears some people do. Story 100. You do not have to agree with all of your partner's politics. If you fight about one issue and understand where they stand, do not pick a fight about it. My wife is very empathetic. I was just raised to believe you should take care of your own house first. Story 101. We meet in the middle. I am a little more on one side, and he is leaning a little more on the other. But we are still pretty much on the same page about things that truly matter to us. I do not really define myself or others by politics within reason, so it is just not a big deal to us. Story 102. There is a quote that I try to keep in mind. We judge ourselves by our intentions and judge others by their outcomes. I think this applies interpersonally. People you trust and care about, you judge by their intentions, and people you do not have that trust with, you judge by their outcomes. I have many people who are important to me, including my girlfriend, with whom I disagree politically. However, I recognize that they almost universally have good intentions. I may not believe the strategies they are trying to use will succeed in achieving their goals, but I recognize they come from a place of good intentions. In some cases, I may even think the goals they are trying to achieve will not have the benefits they expect, but I still recognize that they want to achieve those goals for good reasons. Keeping this in mind, I can have healthy debates with people I disagree with because there is never any doubt that they have good intentions. The differences lie in opinion and sometimes disagreement on matters of fact regarding the goals and strategies to get there. Story 103. You don't look at Kellyanne Conway and her ex-husband who founded the Lincoln Project. Story 104. My brother-in-law comes from a Mexican family. He was born in the United States. He is voting for Donald Trump. He is only 23 years old, so he is fairly young and not very experienced in many aspects of life. He recently got married, and his wife wants to vote for Kamala Harris, but she cannot because she is not yet in a position to do so. Her paperwork is still in the state she moved from. It is a complicated situation that I prefer not to discuss online. I asked them both who they were voting for, and I got the sense that he is imposing his views on her. She only mentioned who she would vote for when he was not in the room. She appeared extremely uncomfortable when he started talking about Donald Trump. Story 105. There has to be a limit where differing opinions will break a relationship. Think of the extremes: full Make America Great Again right-wing versus full social justice leftist. I do not see how that could ever work. My wife and I have differing opinions, but not by a large degree. She is more conservative than I am, and we have voted for different people, but our lives are much more than politics. We have similar tastes in music and movies, and generally enjoy being around each other. Story 106. Mostly we do not talk about politics, which is probably good for me because I have overconsumed political news since about 2015 and have been trying to moderate my consumption since it could eventually drive me insane. She is politically opposite from me, but she is not as politically engaged as I am and is not necessarily thinking critically about the candidates. It does not really matter in my state because a single party has most of the control. I do not like the candidates she will likely vote for, but I recognize that any one person's vote is a drop in the bucket. I choose not to let politics decide my personal relationships. Story 107. Speaking as a Canadian, my partner loves Donald Trump. He is very pro-Joe Rogan and all that crazy stuff. Huberman. I do not know, just the basic bro kind of stuff. As you can tell, I am very much against any of that bro science. I do not like Donald Trump. I am a very left-leaning woman with maybe a few saucy takes, but that is about it. Honestly, I let him talk, I ask questions, and if I do not agree, I just tell him, well, Donald Trump did all these great things and so on. And I say, well, he has also done these bad things, so that is why I do not like him. Agree to disagree, I am afraid. Story 108. In my case, we do it by having the same goals in mind. We both want to do what is best for our family, and we share the same religion. We just differ on which political party is doing a better job accomplishing those goals. I think a major part of it is that we both take what the party says with a grain of salt, since we will never know the full truth of their intentions and cannot fully trust the news and what they report. Story 109. My parents are very happy together, even though my mother is very liberal and my father is quite conservative. They do not care enough about politics for it to make a difference. It almost never comes up. Story 110. Generally, people want the same things but disagree on how politicians can achieve them. For instance, the vast majority of Americans do not care about sexual orientation or gay and transgender rights as long as it does not cost them taxpayer money. Everyone wants a better economy and lower tax bills for the lower and middle class. Nobody wants the country to engage in unnecessary wars. People want safer communities and more public services available at a lower cost. The only real disagreements tend to be about religious philosophy such as abortion, gay marriage, and legalizing drugs. In my opinion, none of these should be political issues. Story 111. Politics are made to divide. Realize your relationship is stronger than what you both need to worry about. They create groups to divide people. Once we come together, the government loses, and they do not want that. That is why we have so much hate and disagreement. Do not let them win and stay together in your personal relationship. It is okay to disagree. Talk about it and be civil to each other. Story 112. It is important to remember that, in the grand scheme of things, Republicans and Democrats are not vastly different in policy, and both generally occupy similar positions on the political spectrum. Donald Trump is a divisive figure, but couples choosing between Hillary Clinton and George W. Bush or Barack Obama and John McCain or Mitt Romney likely do not envision a world that is significantly different in terms of their material existence. It largely comes down to which individual values are affirmed on television. Story 113. We are not that different from each other. I am a leftist completely frustrated with the direction that the Democratic Party has taken and feel politically alienated from both major parties in the United States. My girlfriend is a liberal who believes in the Democratic Party and their message. If we talk about the presidential election, it will turn into an argument because she has been campaigning for them and has been encouraging people to vote, while I am sitting out the election in protest of a party that has left me behind as they have shifted to the right to build a bigger coalition. But at the end of the day, we agree on topics like abortion access, feminism, immigration, labor rights, and others. That fundamental care for other people and our planet is what unites us. Could I date someone further right than that? Absolutely not. Story 114. The couples I have seen make it work despite being in different political parties do not disagree on their core issues or worldview. They both agree that taxes should be raised on the rich but lowered for the working class, for example. Story 115. My parents were quite politically different. Mom was more liberal and Dad was more conservative. Dad died in 2005, so I don't know if he would have supported the Make America Great Again movement. He liked conservative talk radio and thought Fox News was acceptable. He was a big fan of George W. Bush as president, and he and my older sister had many arguments about the Iraq War. I like to think that Donald Trump might have been a bridge too far for him, but it's hard to say. He was one of those people who liked that Bush came off as somewhat unintelligent. Would a vastly less intelligent, meaner, and more evil person have appealed to him? I'm honestly glad that I don't know. Mom died in 2020 just before COVID-19 began in the United States. She hated Donald Trump and everything the Republican Party had become. Not long before she died, she left the Catholic Church because she was strongly pro-choice. I think if Dad had lived and become a supporter of Donald Trump, they would have had to basically stop speaking to one another. I don't know if they would have divorced, but I know Mom would not have been able to tolerate sharing her life with someone who was vocal in their support of Donald Trump. Story 116. Two co-workers I know are happily married with 2 children. One is a member of the Democratic Party, and the other is a member of the Republican Party. However, they share more in common with each other in their political beliefs than they do with the current candidates on both sides. Both lean toward a centrist position. They do not agree on every major topic, but they agree on most. Story 117. In my relationships throughout life, I was only concerned with libido, whether they had a good character, and if they made me feel wanted. I could not even fathom caring about anything else. In the year 2024, people care about useless things that will not change anything in your life in the long run. If a person cannot stop talking about politics, regardless of their position on the spectrum, I am out. Story 118. I am a libertarian. No one shares my views and I dislike everyone. She is a Democratic Party supporter aligned with Bernie Sanders. She also dislikes everyone. We both have equal chances of seeing any policy we support ever happen. Story 119. I would never consider a supporter of Donald Trump trustworthy, intelligent, kind, or safe to be around. Story 120. The Democrats from 10 years ago are the conservatives today. That is how. Story 121. They have their priorities and I have mine. We agree on many things, but I rank some higher and she ranks others higher, which determines our voting spread and tendencies. Otherwise, it is irrelevant. I find those who make their entire lives, including romance, political or unbearable, so it works out. Story 122. Because we are philosophical, not political. We have not been drawn into tribalism. I could not imagine living that way. This is not a criticism of people who do. Everyone is free to define themselves in whatever way makes them feel good, happy, and worthwhile. However, I just could not imagine feeling aligned with such obviously flawed political leaders, parties, and rigid thinking. It feels overwhelmingly designed to put everyone at odds with one another. Story 123. I like how I saw a couple with one supporting Donald Trump and the other supporting Kamala Harris getting along fine. It is nice to see when both sides usually refer to the other as horrible human beings. Story 124. We argue about dishes, laundry detergent, and my diet instead. Story 125. Neither of my parents is affiliated with a party, so they are unable to vote in primary elections, which are closed in their state. My father is a moderate-leaning Democrat, and my mother is far-right-leaning and surprisingly doesn't care about any of Donald Trump's questionable traits or practices. They say they don't discuss each other's secret ballot, so there's some benefit of the doubt. However, they would be lying if they didn't have a good guess of how the other votes each time. My dad admitted to voting for Ross Perot, unaware of the veteran claim being false. I believe religious people should marry within their religion, meaning Shiites cannot marry Sunnis, and members of the Presbyterian Church, USA, cannot marry members of the Presbyterian Church in America. Furthermore, I do not think religious people should be allowed to procreate until this issue is controlled within our solar system. There should be mandatory abortions and possibly sterilization since people are unlikely to change their outdated beliefs. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.